CPAC International Training. We really appreciate your interest. This all happened randomly, rather randomly. I think 6 years ago, Aeba from Japan approached me and said that he was interested in creating an organization in Tokyo, and that one day he hoped to start a CPAC in Japan. At that point, we did not have any thoughts about expanding CPAC overseas, but we were happy to work with Jay to help him fulfill his vision. And the first CPAC in Tokyo took place 3 years ago, and it was a great success. And information started to leak out, and we started getting more and more requests. So we expanded to Australia and Korea and Brazil in 2019. And we have gotten more and more inquiries asking, can we host a CPAC in our own country? And we thought that the thing to do would be to have a training session here at our own CPAC, so that people who are interested in possibly starting a CPAC in their own country could learn how to do it, learn the lessons that we've all learned over the last 3 years. So thank you for all of you for coming. But there's one thing that unites all of us, and that is a basic belief in conservatism. Now, here in America, we think of conservatism in more than one way. There are different kinds of conservatives here. And one thing I want to make sure everybody understands is that when we go to Japan, or Australia, or Brazil, or Korea, we will never say, you need to think exactly like we do in America. Conservatism in America is in large part based on our own history and our culture and our traditions here. There are certain unifying principles that do unite us. But conservatism will be different here than in other places. So I've asked Dr. David Azerrad, who is, David, are you actually a U.S. citizen or only Canadian, right? Canadian. I was hoping you were going to say dual citizen.
Next year.
But Dr. Azerrad is one of the greatest scholars in America on America's founding and the principles of America's founding and conservatism. So even though he's Canadian, he really knows who we are as a people, and broadly what conservatism is. And I thought we would start with Dr. Azerrad talking about what it is that unites us. After David has finished speaking, I've asked Jay Aeba, who has more experience than anybody on holding a CPAC overseas, to talk about what CPAC looks like in Japan. And after 3 successful CPACs, each one larger than the previous, what he's learned. Mistakes he has made, because we all make mistakes. I make mistakes every day. Things he's learned, what he's done to improve CPAC in Tokyo. And then bring all of our international partners together, Japan, Australia, Brazil, Korea, and have a conversation of what we've all learned together. And then get to the real how-tos. Have experts really talk about particular parts. So, David, if you would kindly take the mic, and if you want to stand up here, feel free. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm always at a loss when I'm asked to define conservatism, which is somewhat paradoxical because I'm a conservative. I teach conservative political thought. And I worked at the largest conservative think tank in the world for a decade, the Heritage Foundation. But you see, the first difficulty you have when you try to define conservatism is that it's going to vary from country to country. As Dan just mentioned, conservatism in America is not going to look like conservatism in Poland, for example. And a conservative, whether he be Polish or American, is going to want to keep it that way. Because a conservative is someone who appreciates, and let me use a word that usually only the left invokes, a conservative is someone who appreciates diversity. not in the way that the left understands it, but in the way of conserving national differences. A conservative is someone who opposes the leveling and homogenizing tendencies of the age. There's a very famous French philosopher named Alexander Kojève, who boldly announced at the beginning of the 20th century that history would culminate in what he called a universal and homogeneous state. A globalized world of markets and consumers without countries and citizens. That, for a conservative, I think, is a vision of hell. Conservatives want to live in a heterogeneous world of sovereign nation states with distinct cultural traditions and religions. It's not just that conservatism differs from country to country. It is not even unified within any given country. Again, Dan mentioned this, but take America, for example. We have social conservatives, we have fiscal conservatives, we have national security conservatives. We have conservatives who read Russell Kirk, conservatives who read F.A. Hayek, conservatives who read John Locke, conservatives who read Edmund Burke. We have traditionalists, we have constitutionalists, now we have populists and nationalists who may or may not belong on the right, depending on who you're asking. All of these people are united by one thing: a shared antipathy and opposition to the left and its revolutionary political projects. But beyond that, there's no fundamental agreement. So you could think of American conservatism, and my mother is French and it's the same thing in France, as a river into which flow different streams comprised of distinct intellectual currents. And then, of course, the last difficulty you always have is the perennial problem facing all conservatives in a progressive age. Namely, when do you call it quits? When do you basically admit that you've lost on an issue and that you're no longer going to fight on it? So let me give you an example. Conservatives used to oppose women's suffrage. And then they lost. And then one day they just gave up and said, we accept the political equality of women as citizens. And those who didn't were not called conservatives, they were called reactionaries. But the conservatives moved on. So all this to say, there is no one definition of conservatism. That being said, I was not invited here to tell you that. I was invited here to answer the question on the program. What is conservatism and what it isn't? So let me take a crack at it. I like to begin with Edmund Burke, because he's the father of conservatism, and his work, The Reflection on the Revolutions in France, is not the definitive or the authoritative statement on conservatism, but you can't be a conservative and not have read that book. I think it's the proper starting point for conservatism. Why? Because it is the first book written to counter the first modern, leftist, radical, revolutionary ideology, the French Revolution, which attempted, for the first time in human history, there had been revolutions before. If you read Thucydides, there were revolutions in the Greek city-states. But these revolutions were, you kill one person in power, and you install another one. The French Revolution was something different. It was an attempt to fundamentally transform France. They changed the calendar, they changed the dates, they got rid of the church, they expropriated. It was to make France unrecognizable. And Burke, in response to that, wrote a book called The Reflections on the Revolution in France that I think really gives you the first insight into what conservatism is that it's a response to an attempt to fundamentally transform your country. The left is always the first aggressor, and the right then reacts and says, no, we're not opposed to change, but we are opposed to radical, revolutionary change. See, let me put it to you this way. When someone on the left looks at their country, what they first see is injustice, oppression, and this makes them angry. Progressivism is anchored in outrage. When they think of the past, they're disgusted at their own countries and what the countries have done. Conservatism, by contrast, is anchored in gratitude. There's a line in Burke that I think better than any other captures the conservative worldview and temperament. And it's in Latin, so you'll indulge me, but then I'll translate it for you.
Spartam nactum es, hanc exorna. Sparta is your inheritance, now adorn her. It's a line from a lost play by Euripides that Agamemnon speaks to his brother Menelaus. You have received Sparta as an inheritance. Your task is now to adorn her, to make her beautiful. What do you begin with? You begin with Sparta. You begin with your country, Germany, Australia, South Korea, Japan, Brazil, France, Poland. You don't begin with a comprehensive metaphysics, with a grand theory of the good, with a laundry list of policies and principles. You begin with your land, your people, your language, your traditions, your religions, your way of life. And you are deeply grateful to have received these things. You are imbued with a sense of reverence and love for the people you belong to. This nation is yours, it's your inheritance, but this is not an inheritance that you're permitted to squander. You are a trustee. You're a custodian. This was given to you by others. Your task is to transmit it to the next generation. The way we put it in America in our Constitution is, in the preamble of the Constitution, it says that America's mission is to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We look to the next generation to transmit to them what we inherited from our forefathers. And therefore, we're not opposed to change. We're not opposed to improvement. We're not opposed to making our country better or more beautiful. But what we do reject is the idea of a radical, fundamental transformation. The job of a conservative is not to transform, it is to transmit. Now, there's an obvious problem with this definition. Namely, well, what happens if the country you were born into is not a lovable country? What happens if those who came before you did not beautify Sparta, they disfigured her? What if the generations before you, say the radicals from the 1960s, fundamentally transformed your country so that you no longer feel at home in it? What if, as a result of massive third world immigration, you don't recognize your country anymore? I mean, think of what a strange sentiment that is, to not feel at home in your own country. I have a friend, a very prominent conservative, whose name I will not give, who tells me on a regular basis, I hate America. I don't like this country anymore. He was born here. He loves this country, but he doesn't recognize it anymore. Every day when he turns on the news, he feels that all of the things that he holds dear are being desecrated and assaulted by the elites. You see, what we've had in America, and I can't speak to the case for all other countries, but it's largely the case in Europe. Our countries were fundamentally transformed in the 20th century. We in America and in Europe had a regime change. The progressives and their liberal heirs, through a series of rolling revolutions, set about and succeeded in fundamentally transforming America, France, Belgium, and England. They marched through the institutions, as Gramsci said. They remade the country in their image. They changed the ruling ideals, modified the virtues that the people cultivate. And as a result, we find ourselves living in countries that, as conservatives, we're no longer really feeling at home in. And therefore, I told you that conservatism originates in gratitude. But I think in this day and age, conservatism has to be more about counter-revolution than it has to be about conservation. It's somewhat paradoxical because the term conservative points to a certain quaintness, not wanting to rock the boat. But if you've lost your country, if the elites, the media, Hollywood, the universities, the schools, the Fortune 500 companies, I mean, if any of you are under the impression that multinational corporations give a crap about your country and your traditions, you are deeply mistaken. We've coined in America a very good word, namely woke capitalism, to describe the phenomenon of major corporations waging war on the cultural traditions of the people. That's not to say, by the way, that we hate businesses and we hate markets. We just realized that the largest corporations have been taken over by the left and are used to advance their agenda. Same thing with many of our churches. The mainline Protestant churches, large elements of the Catholic Church, have also gone woke and are pushing the left's agenda. And therefore, in this age, conservatives need to mount a counter-revolution. And if you're interested in following American politics, I would tell you this may be one of the deepest divisions in America today on the right. The establishment conservatives, generally speaking, think that, things are okay. I mean, it's not ideal, but if we do a few more reforms and maybe, we have a bit more dialogue with the left, we can fix things. And I think that the insurgency that Donald Trump has led, but he's not the first one to speak this way, Pat Buchanan preceded him by many years, and many other conservatives have felt this way, feel that we have lost our country, not completely, but largely, and we are revolutionaries. And in a certain paradoxical sense, we shouldn't be reading Burke today. We should be reading Alinsky. We should be reading the New Left. We should understand how they did it, how they marched through the institutions and they succeeded in transforming the country so that we in turn can do it ourselves. So my Latin is not good enough to modify the Burke quote, but what I would leave you with in English, I think for Americans and for many Europeans, again, I can't speak to the rest of the world, I don't know the politics of South Korea or Japan or Brazil well enough, but our task today is that Sparta is our nation. We must now reclaim her. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Dr. Spalding? Dr. Spalding is your boss.
Yes, he is.
By the way, David has just recently, this is true, right? You made the switch.
Yeah.
He's left the Heritage Foundation. He's now with Hillsdale College, which is just right across the street from here. Are there any questions for Dr. Azarad? I think I saw a hand.
I would like to introduce myself first. My name is George Weinberg. I'm coming from Germany. I'm American citizen, naturalized American citizen, proud to be conservative, and do live still in Berlin, Germany, capital of the country. And we have, of course, in our country, in Germany, I'm always confused what is my country. My country is, of course, United States of America, but I still live in Berlin, partially in Florida. That's why my tape on my face. We have a huge problem right now in Europe. This is under the name Green New Deal. And under the presumption to save the planet, in my opinion, it is a huge movement, political movement. Everybody knows the name Greta from Sweden. In Europe, especially in Germany, to totally change the system. And they're talking about Green New, save the planet, blah, blah, blah. But basically they want to change everything, system and political system. And no cars, no airplanes, no cars, you know the story. And the question that I have, what kind of points or strategy we might have to approach this kind of, I'm sorry to say this, bullshit and stupidity.
Yeah. So, the first thing I think of when it comes to the environment is, I'm a conservative, and I would call myself a conservationist. I mean, part of what makes America beautiful, for example, is its natural splendors. I don't want to despoil this land. I don't want to sell the Grand Canyon to the Chinese so that they can mine it for something. I do want to conserve the environment. Now, a conservationist is different than an environmentalist. A conservationist, I think, is someone who doesn't have religious fanaticism for the environment, someone who is not a central planner at heart and views the pretext of saving the environment as a way to bring socialism to the country and assert control over the entirety of the economy. And a conservationist is not someone who hates free markets and capitalism and thinks that they are incompatible with the environment. What you see with environmentalism is, you're older than me. What I remember from my life, my 40 years of adult consciousness, is that the hysterical apocalyptic tone is the same, but the issue changes. So when I was a kid, it was acid rain. And then it became the ozone layer, and then it became global warming, and now it's climate change. So the issue changes, the hysteria is always the same, we can't wait, and the solutions are always the same. There is an anti-human underpinning to the environmentalist movement, and it ultimately culminates in the anti-humanist movement, which says that human beings are the greatest cancer on the planet, and we should get rid of it. So admittedly, this is a fringe movement on the left, but the logic points to nature is good, growth is bad, human beings are bad. And so I'm not an expert on environmental policy or on climate change, but I think it would be foolish as a conservative to dismiss offhand concerns about wanting to preserve the environment. There just has to be a better way to go about it than the Greta Thunberg hysteria, the Green New Deal in the US that we have too thanks to Ocasio-Cortez. We need to have a conservative approach to conservation, I would say.
Thank you so much. Dr. Azra, really appreciate your
Thank you.
time. I would now like to introduce Chairman Aeba of the Japanese Conservative Union. He has been an inspiration to me. He has learned so much for several decades studying conservatism, and he's been a real leader in Japan. Chairman Aeba, my friend and chairman of the Japanese Conservative Union and the head of the CPAC in Japan. Thank you for joining us.
皆さんこんにちは。
Good afternoon, everyone.
JCU 議長の相葉直道と申します。
My name is Jikido Aeba, the chairman of JCU.
本当に、深い絆で結ばれた友人のダン・シュナイダーから今回、CPAC を3回日本で開いていることのさまざまな体験談、成功や失敗も含めた教訓を話してくれということなので、これからお話ししたいと思います。
I was asked by one of my best friends, Dan Schneider, whom I had a strong bond with. He asked me to share your experiences, including successful ones and all kind of experience of lesson learned, and with people at our CPAC. So I'm going to share my experiences with you today.
今から私が話すことはあくまで、日本特有かもしれない、また私のキャラクター特有のものかもしれません。普遍的なものではないかもしれませんので、決してこのやり方を押し付けるつもりはございませんが、一つの参考として聞いていただければと思います。
So the things that I'm going to share with you could be very particular to our culture in Japan, and could be only applied because of my own characteristics. So this couldn't be maybe universal, which will be applied to all of your countries. So just for the reference and just something that you can use with, please listen on the way.
まず私がどうして日本でも CPAC を開きたいと思ったかというと、それは2011年から7回連続でずっとこのワシントンでの CPAC を見続けてきた、そこに大きな刺激を受けたというところが大きな理由です。
So why I decided to hold Japanese CPAC in Japan? Because from 2011, I kept attending this American CPAC 7 times consecutively without missing any. And I was so much inspired, and now I want to do CPAC in Japan, in my country.
でその間にワシントンを中心に保守の友人アメリカでたくさんできまして、そのワシントンの人たちから日本でも JCU を作ってコンサバティズムを広めたらどうだと本当に多くのお誘いを受けたのがこの日本でのきっかけだったと思います。
So by keep coming back to Washington, D.C., I made many conservative friends in Washington, D.C. and around the city. And those conservative friends and fellows encouraged me, why don't you create a conservative union in Japan, and why don't you hold CPAC in Japan? So those encouragement pushed me to do this.
ただ日本でやるからにはやはり大きな責任を伴う、つまり一度やったからには打ち上げ花火のように一回きりではなくって継続性を持たせなければいけないし、同時にこれが日本の政治の質を良くすること、そしてアジアの平和と繁栄に貢献できること、そして友人であるアメリカ、その他の国々と連携しながらより良い世界を作っていく方向につながること、そういったことにつながらなければただ単にイベントをやることに意味はないと私は考えました。
But I realized, I was convinced that to start this in Japan, it's going to be a big responsibility. I'm going to take on a lot of responsibilities. So just one-time big party or event doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. So this event has to help improve our political quality in Japan, and also it has to be helpful to realize the peace and prosperity in Asian countries and all over the world. And also partnering with American friends and colleagues, it has to be going on. So just event itself doesn't mean anything. It has to give some fruit.
そこで私が考えたことは、まずは継続性を持たせるためにはこの CPAC の主催者がアメリカンコンサーバティブユニオンであるように、日本においてもその CPAC を運営するJCU という組織をしっかり作ることが大切だ。まず組織化が大事だと私は考えました。
So to continue these events, not only one-time thing, but should to be a continuous and sustainable, as ACU is an organization to keep hosting this big event every year. In Japan, I was convinced that we have to form the organization to hold CPAC, which is Japanese Conservative Union.
そこで2015年に JCU を正式な法人として日本で立ち上げましたが、その後 JCPAC を開くまでには2年かけました。2017年まで約2年間待ってから3年目に初めて JCPAC を開きました。
So 2015, we created JCU, and JCU became an official incorporated organization in Japan. And we waited for 2 years to prepare to start the Japanese CPAC officially in 2017. So we waited for 2 years.
なぜそこまで時間をかけたかというと、イベントをやるにはやはり予算も必要だし、いろいろな日本でのさまざまなお声掛けというんですかね、仲間を増やすことも必要だし、時間が随分かかるんじゃないかなと思っていて、結構なかなか実は踏み出せなかったんです。これ私の一つの失敗談なんですけれども、そんな矢先、ワシントンとかいろんなちょうどトランプのキャンペーンも始まってたかな、もういろんなところでマット・シュラップに会うたんびに「ジェイ、いつ JCPAC やるんだ」と、もう会うたんびに必ず言われたので参ったなという感じだったんです。私は追い詰められてました。
So I waited for 2 years because to throw a big event, we need money. So the budget is very big thing, and also we need a good staff and people, supporters. So I was kind of waiting and hesitant to just jump in to do this. So that was one of my mistakes that I've done. I waited too long. But each time, whenever I kept coming back to DC, I met, I think it was during the Trump's campaigning, the Matt Sharp, the chairman of ACU, who is hosting this big event, he kept telling me, when are you going to do Japanese CPAC? When are you going to do Japanese CPAC? So I kept being bugged by him each time I met him. So I was kind of cornered to do something.
これはもちろん半分冗談も入ってるんですけれども、そこで私は決断したんですね。もうとにかくやろうと。2017年になったら JCPAC をやるぞと、この CPAC の場で、宣言してしまいまして、自分で自分を追い込むことにしました。
So yeah, it was half of his joke, but however, I was determined, and finally, okay, I should do it now, and I claimed I said that I'm going to do CPAC in Tokyo. So I announced here officially so that I put myself into that position with no choice.
それで2017年初めて11月に開催できたんですが、この時には当時非常にネームバリューがあって、悪役のように言われていた、今はもう政権から離れましたけれども、スティーブン・バノンをメインゲストとして呼んだことで非常に大きな集客、メディアの注目、これを集めることができて、ある意味大成功でした。
So 2017, we did our first CPAC in November in Tokyo. And that time, the person who had a big name, he had a name value, and also he was taking a kind of a bad role, and he was already stepped down from the official status of the government. Steve Bannon, he was very famous, and we welcomed him as a main feature guest speaker. So that helped us to have a big audience, and it was a successful event.
舞台裏ではすごい大変だったんですけどね、この人の対応で。
But there's a lot of difficulties behind the scenes to how to respond to him and welcome him.
もちろん感謝しています。来てもらって感謝しています。
But we are thankful him coming all the way to Japan.
でこの1回目の成功を一つの自信にしまして、2018年にも同じような月に、秋頃ですかね、JCPAC の2回目を開催することができました。
And having the confidence through this first successful Japanese CPAC, we held the second Japanese CPAC in autumn 2018. We did it.
でこの時にも運よく今首席補佐官の代行をされてますけれども、ミック・マルバニーがメインゲストとして来てくれまして、やはり前年の倍の数の方が参加していることになりまして、これも大成功でした。
And luckily, Mick Mulvaney, who is a chief staff for the President Trump, at that time he was not in the position yet, but we welcomed him. And thanks to him and thanks to many guests, we had a successful CPAC, and the audience was doubled compared with the previous year.
ただ、ここまで2回やってみてですね、その感じたことは、なんだろう、このゲストとかネームバリューで開催するというよりも、どういうテーマを設定して、何が今の時代認識でアジアに、世界に、アメリカに必要なんだろうかということを考えて、テーマでもって人を引きつけるようにしなければ、実は継続性がないんじゃないかと思って、3年目の昨年からはJCPAC 自体に大きな一つのテーマを設けることにしたんです。
So, but we were considering, so we've been working by having a big name and try to have a valuable guests, but we start to think that we have to think about the subject or theme that we have to discuss in our event so that we can contribute for the world peace and Asia and the world. So that is the one we need to have a continuous event and sustainable events. So from last year, 2019, we decided to focus on the theme and the subjects that we are going to deal with in our event.
そうした観点で世界を見回してみたときに、アジアでは中国の覇権主義が非常に猛威を振るっており、北朝鮮も暴発をしており、香港でも民主化運動が始まり、そして中東でもさまざまな紛争が起こり、ヨーロッパでもEU の解体のような非常に世界中がごたごたしている、世界中が乱れている、この乱世が到来しているというのが私の時代認識でした。
So that's the time that I had a recognition of the current world situation. So in Asia, China is getting more pushing the totalitarianism, and in North Korea has been aggressive, and in Hong Kong there's a big movement, and in Middle East there's another confusion, and EU is starting to dissolve. So the world is full of a lot of chaos. So this chaos is a theme that I thought to deal with.
なので2019年は大きなテーマ「乱世を切り開く」というテーマで、設定しまして、特にゲストに頼るということなく、このテーマ設定で多くの方の関心を引きつけ、さらにその前年の倍増の数の方に参加していただくことができました。
So 2019, we decided that theme was surviving through this chaotic world. And rather than focusing on the big named people, we focused on discussing the important themes that were required by the world and try to attract people's interests and concerns. And we ended up having the doubled audience compared to the previous year again.
もちろんこうして多くの方に来ていただいたのは実は今日こちらに、座っていただいてるんですけど、私にとっても本当に大きな恩人である日本で有名な国際政治学者の藤井元気先生、そのチームが本当に多くの動員の協力もしてくれまして、そのおかげで CPAC のバリューが非常に上がった、お客さんも増えたというのが実は大きな私の中での感謝の要素でもございます。
But I'm very, very, very thankful to the big support, including Mr. Professor Genki Fujii, who is here among the audience, who is an international political scholar, very well known in Japan, and he brought a lot of audience. And thanks to him, the quality of JCU was up and improved, and also many people, he brought a lot of audience, so really appreciate it.
こうして過去3回本当に多くの方のおかげ、特に共同開催をしてくれている ACU、マット・シュラップとダン・シュナイダーのおかげをもって今ここまで来れてるわけですけれども、振り返ってみますとやはりその CPAC というのは多分これから皆さん開いていかれたいと思うんですけれども、何のための CPAC かということはいつも自分の中で問うようにしております。
So last 3 years we could have a successful CPAC thanks to the support of ACU who co-hosted with us. And Matt Schrapp and Dan Schneider, they was a big help. So that's thanks to them we could come to this point. But I always ask myself, why we are doing CPAC? Why? So I always try to come back to the original motivation.
それはやはりACU から学ぶところっていうのは実は非常に大きくて、ACU は常にコンサバティズムを定義する、そしてコンサバティズムを育てていく、コンサバティズムを発信していく、この3つを非常に中心に大事にしておられます。
So we've learned a lot from ACU. So ACU has been always valuing defining conservatism and nurturing conservative people and sending the message. Those are the ones that ACU really values and focuses.
保守を定義するというのはおそらく彼らがやっている格付けになるでしょうし、保守を育てていくというのはこうしたブートキャンプや各州での選挙の運動員を育てていくということになるでしょうし、保守を発信するというのが CPAC に当たるものだと私は考えています。
So they've been defining conservatism by giving a rating the congressmen and senators and all politicians.And to nurture and raise up conservative people, which is boot camp and like this training, and also they've been doing a lot of try to nurture the people who are working on campaigning in each state of the United States. And messaging is the one that this place is the one that they are focusing on messaging.
なので本当に CPAC を成功に導いて、皆様方の国、特に日本なんかそうですけれども、いわゆるグラスルーツ、草の根を育てていくという意味では CPAC の位置づけも一つの保守の発信の手段であると捉えまして、一番大事なことはどうやってグラスルーツを自分の国で根付かせるか、そこが一番 CPAC が継続していくためにも大事なことであるというふうに思っております。
So the important point to make it successful is the grassroots. This is like a grassroots movement. So CPAC is one way to do it, but the important thing is how to increase, how to make the grassroots movements bigger in our countries. That is the most important thing.
あとは何にせよやはりこの組織があるというのは非常に継続性のためには大事なことでして、おそらく私 JCU の方でも優秀なスタッフに囲まれて、守られているがゆえに JCPAC を継続的に開けているのだと思います。なので私は皆様方にはしっかりとした組織を作っていくということについてはぜひお勧めしたいなと思っております。
So creating the organization is a key to have a continuous, sustainable activities. So JCU is very blessed with amazing staff members. And so that's why we've been doing this event successfully. So to have a continuity and sustainability, organization is very important. So that's the things that I really want to recommend you to do that.
話も長くなりましたので、また何か後で質問等あればお受けしたいと思いますが、私の説明は以上とさせていただきます。ありがとうございました。
So I talked long, so right now I just want to stop here, and if you have any questions, please feel free to come to me, and I would like to answer all kind of questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Chairman Aeba, thank you so much. I hoped to have Jay and one of his teammates with him on stage as we ask our team from Australia to join us. And then, let's see, do I have any of our Brazilian partners here? I don't, why don't, let's see, steps. Well, maybe Jay and Michi, you could join us. And I know that Annie Chan is not able to join us, but Patrick and Andrew? Yes. Yes, yes. One good thing about all of these CPACs is that we have traveled together. Jay went to Australia, as did Andrew in the Korean partnership, and except I don't think anybody went to Brazil who's up on this stage, right?
Next year.
Next year.
This year.
Andrew Cooper of Liberty Works, who held the CPAC in Australia. Lyndall was with him. I wanted to start off asking you, how did you start CPAC Australia? Why did you start it? What were the particular goals that you were after?
So, in Australia, there was no central convention or conference that brought the right side of politics together. Not just conservatives, but libertarians, those that rail against the left side of politics. And I wanted to create something that filled that gap. And when I looked around and I thought about how I could launch this, it kept on occurring to me that, there's this great conference in America called Cpac. And I kept on thinking, I would just love to have that conference down here in Australia. And so I approached Dan, or Dan's assistant, and she kindly gave me half an hour with Dan in the office with no agenda. And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you and I chatted for 2 hours, shook hands, had a deal, and we launched CPAC 12 months later. And it was 9 months later, I think it was. It was fantastic. And the one thing I'll say about the American Conservative Union and Dan Schneider and Matt Schlapp and all the other people that I've met, they're incredibly generous. And they're incredibly straightforward, they're honest people, and they're tremendous people to work with. I mean, you couldn't find a greater example of, frankly, conservative values than these people that you could potentially work with. So, I feel very fortunate that, your assistant granted me that time. Because we held CPAC in Australia. We were concerned about how the brand would translate, and so we booked a venue for 600 people, but we sold out. And more than that though, the brand really generated some press. If the question is, what are some of the learnings? One of the things we weren't prepared for was the outrage. The left in Australia saw the potential of what CPAC can do down there, what it could possibly do in your countries. And we weren't prepared. I mean, at the latest count, I think we had, 8,500 media hits globally. I was fielding media calls from Germany. I recall one of the papers there was interested in what we're doing. From Britain, plenty from the US, all the publications in Australia, of which the majority are left-wing. We're writing stories. There was a very surreal moment when on TV I observed the Prime Minister defending CPAC against attacks from the opposition leader in Parliament. That was very strange. We had senators speaking out against us. Dan Ryan was an NRA sort of influencer that came into Australia and was going to tell Australians that we should all take up arms against the government. There was a lot of, so we weren't prepared for that side of it. The brand really translated. I was unaware of how strong that brand was, and you know, I hope we did it justice. We make a lot of mistakes, and if there's any questions later, I can answer some of those. We did make a lot of mistakes, but these guys are incredibly supportive, and I'm very grateful to be involved. Yeah, I'm very grateful to be involved.
Andrew literally has been threatened with prosecution and jail time for holding a CPAC in Australia.
There's it comes under some of the free speech rules and some of the laws that cover insidious Chinese influence in the Australian political system. The bureaucrats use these laws for the first time ever to threaten me with jail time for falling under the influence of the American Conservative Union. It's the craziest thing. I've literally just launched a High Court case in Australia challenging this legislation under the Constitution. It's crazy. But, you know, this legislation, we can have a chance to knock it out because we held this conference. So hopefully I'll have some good news on that next year.
So Linda was very helpful. Linda, what are some of the things that you learned in the first go-around with CPAC in Australia? What do you think you'll do differently?
Well, firstly, Dan, I have to say thank you for your involvement and how generous and how kind and how supportive you and the others were. I was very excited to be coming on board because I had always been a Conservative. I had been a Liberal Party member for over 30 years, but I felt going along to the conferences it was just the same old, same old. And CPAC gave us the opportunity to be with other like-minded people who weren't necessarily party members, and they were also grateful. I think one thing that I wasn't prepared for was the amount of withdrawal symptoms that everybody had. It was incredible. It was the outpouring of grief. It was like someone had died. It really was at the end of it, wasn't it? Yeah. It really was. We had to end up starting a Facebook group for those people who had been to CPAC, who still wanted some of it. And even now, I've done a post this morning on the Facebook page, people saying, when is it, oh, we want to be there. So it started a whole new movement. So we're very grateful to be part of that. What could we have done differently? As Andrew said, we did make a lot of mistakes. A lot of things we didn't anticipate were going to happen did. Media, just not being, you almost need like 10 clones of Andrew and probably about 3 or 4 of me just to get through, just fielding inquiries, just dealing with everything, and the to-do list, just, you never get to the bottom of it. And I'm an organised person. I like to know at the end of the day I've achieved most of the main things, even if it's just the A list. But some days and some moments it wasn't possible, so that's when you had to take a deep breath and just keep pushing on and keep putting one foot in front of the other and just keep moving forward, really.
Yeah, Matt Schlapp, of course, is the chairman of the board of ACU, and Matt was surprised to discover that the same fights that we have here in the US, you have in Australia, including Antifa, you know, having a protest, yes, and the same kind of PC issues, and Matt just didn't realize that this radical left-wing phenomenon that we're experiencing here in the US is everywhere. And that's why we're working with you, because we understand better than ever before that you're fighting these same fights that we are here, and maybe they're even worse in your own countries. And you know, the radical left is out to fundamentally transform the world. As Dr. Azarad spoke today, conservatism is resisting this radical transformation agenda, learning what's good, accepting what's certain new learnings, but maintaining culture, maintaining one's own nationhood, one's own character. And so, Matt, I think, probably understood it better than ever before, having gone to Australia to see the same fights there.
just on that, David's also spoke about woke capitalism, and we've been bumped from 2 of the major hotel chains. They've cancelled this year's event on us because they don't like what we have to say, which is crazy, right? Conservatives support free markets and capitalism, but these woke capitalist organisations don't want to be associated with us. And to me, it's all going a little bit mad, I think. And I hope it's not in your country, but I suspect it's sweeping.
Well, Andrew first approached me because he was expecting, well, he knew that the elections were coming up in Australia, and all the polls showed that the Prime Minister was going to lose his office, and we thought this would be a good chance to help Australians reconsider what conservatism is. Of course, the Prime Minister ended up winning, but in South Korea, the government has already been taken over by a radical leftist. Moon is better aligned with the North Korean leadership and with the Chinese Communist Party than with the traditions of South Korea. Patrick, Andrew, what was the inspiration? I guess maybe I've already said it, but what can be done in Korea?
Thank you, Dan. And can I say on behalf of our founder, Annie Chan, who would love to have been here, how grateful she is to be involved with this movement, to ACU and to all of you, to come to listen to us today about Korea. Of course, our motivation was what you might call the declining political and economic situation in Korea. And we felt that as a group we had to do something about it. So Annie Chan, and being a long-time supporter of Korea, decided that there would be a sufficient interest in raising a CPAC to form a basis for what might be called a movement that could help in reverse this government situation in Korea, a very unfortunate government situation. So that was the main driver of why we wanted CPAC to come help us in Korea. And in unison with all of our colleagues from overseas, they are ultimately the group to work with, fantastically cooperative, understanding, and I would say without their help we simply could not have done it. So I'm straying from the motivation. I think it's time for me to stop and let Patrick come in too. There's lots we can talk about on the practical level, but let's listen to the questions and see what you'd like us to say about them. I'd like to hand over to my equal partner in all of this, Patrick Kang, who has lived through all of this with me and understands very well the foibles of how it is you bring off a CPAC in Korea.
Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Kang from Cpac. Well, I'm not good at Latin, so I'll say something that I saw from my favorite book, Bible. Book of Luke, chapter 11:9 says, "Ask and it will be given to you, knock and it will be open to you." We literally cornered ACU to work with us, to help us. And they did. Without ACU and your support, nothing would have happened. So from the bottom of our heart, thank you so very much for your cooperation, collaboration, and support that we have seen in the past years. So thank you very much.
If I may just interrupt, this is not false humility. I think you all would have done it on your own because Annie Chan is such a leader and such a driver. She is so concerned for Korea, the country of her birthplace, that she is going to tackle this. We are happy to help her, but there's no doubt she would be driving this forward with or without us, but we're happy to help her.
Right, so the bottom line is that Miss Annie Chan did it because she wanted to rebuild this nation, rebuild the constitution that was collapsing, and also restore the freedom and democracy in South Korea. And she had this big dream, and we are just there to support her. And we're very glad that we are moving forward with her vision and mission. But as a person who was supporting her, right by her, I have a few tips for some of you who may entertain the idea of hosting or holding your own CPAC in your prospective country. I'll just list them very quickly. One of them is being flexible and be brave and have a belief and collaborate and cooperate with ACU. I think two of them are very self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go too deep about it, but let me talk about be brave or have a thick skin. Your objective is noble. We all know that, right? Restore the freedom and democracy in your country. It's very noble. But don't be mistaken that everyone, even your colleague or your fellow conservatives, will agree with you. There will be jealousy, there will be misunderstanding, and there will be competitiveness. People will ask you and point you and say, who do you think you are to hold CPAC in your nation? So please be flexible, have thick skin, work with them, try to build a team, not to dissolve the team, in the partnership with ACU. ACU will definitely come in to support you and help you and how to build a peace amongst yourself. And also have a belief. From time to time, you may feel like this ain't gonna happen. Because of oppressions, like government oppressions or personal group oppressions against you, you may think that this is not gonna happen, but this will happen because it happened in South Korea. We were faced with many challenges and hardships and some of the unbelievable reactions from many different individuals, but we did it, and especially we did it because of ACU's support. So please continue to work with, collaborate and cooperate with ACU, and they will be there to support you. So again, ask and knock, and it will be given an answer to you. Thanks.
I do see that Eduardo Bolsonaro and Elias Posada have joined us from Brazil. Kim, could you figure out a way to help them get incorporated into this? And I do want to ask a question. At CPAC, you made a decision to really recruit college-age young people to do activism training. Andrew, if I'm correct, you did not have a focus on trying to recruit young people. That may not be right. What have you, Andrew, do you think you're going to join? I know that in Japan, they've recruited college-age students. That's one of the things we do at CPAC. Are there things that you learned specifically about how to recruit young people? What are your plans for the future? Maybe this is for all three of you.
I can take a lead if you like. At Cpac, we decided that one thing that was totally missing from an earlier event that we held in order to establish the idea that training and education was missing. And so what we did was we enlisted the fine services of Leadership Institute, and we arranged for training sessions accompanying the CPAC that naturally brought in a lot of young people. And for example, that morning we had 400 people apply. We could only cater for 200, but there was a very strong attraction in joining the training period, which was specifically for young people. So our trick was to build a platform for the young people in the morning, and they could naturally transit to the main event in the afternoon. And I would recommend that you build some educational vision into the way that you structure your CPAC when you eventually take it up.
It's true, Dan, we didn't focus enough on students, and that was a mistake, and that will be certainly one of the focuses. I mean, I took my own children out of school and took them to CPAC because I valued it, and I should have realised that there'd be plenty of others that would have thought the same. So this year, certainly bringing the students along and perhaps just deprogramming them just a little bit. Because let's face it, the education system is a system of indoctrination in most Western countries these days, and possibly in some of the other countries as well. So I think there's great value in that. And one of the things that gives older attendees like myself energy is seeing young people and potential in the room getting involved. So that's certainly going to be a focus. And a mistake we made first year, we will not do that again.
Well, I will say that here at ACU, we continue to improve, which means that there are things that are mistakes. I really wanted to hire a couple people who would spend the whole year traveling around the country to recruit college students either to come to CPAC or to hold what we call watch parties on their own campuses. But we didn't get that done. So we can all make improvements in that area. Before I turn to Eduardo, Jay, Michi, what are some of the plans you have for college students?
I'm Michi from JCU and I'm his staff, and I took the part of the operational side of the Japanese CPAC. And I think we have taken 3 measures to encourage the college students. The first one was we gave 1 session to a student who as a host. And his name was Nagasawa Kenta, and he organized 1 session and he did the crowdfunding to the fund for the speaker's fee, and he was a very good host of his 1 session, and he organized a session to discuss about the Japanese nuclear armament. And the second measure was to decrease the student price dramatically, because it has reduced from about $70 at the first year to the $30 on the second year. So we decreased the student price dramatically. And the third measure is still now we are still planning, but maybe from this year we will start to collaborate with the YouTubers or other new medias, because it will be very useful to access the young people and the new market. So now we are planning to collaborate with YouTubers and other social media stars more.
Thank you. And I have Eduardo Bolsonaro of the most raucous CPAC of all. If you go onto YouTube and Google CPAC Brazil, you'll see a bunch of wonderful Brazilians chanting and having a ball, and probably the most exciting CPAC of all time. Eduardo, what were some of the lessons you learned? And I'll hand you the mic, and I'll be happy. I'll be happy to also allow Elias to answer this after you.
It was very nice. First, thanks for the opportunity, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. Very nice to be people that think in the same way. Not every time we have this opportunity in this great CPAC. I think we could cop the CPAC for Brazil, like for more than 1,000 people. And the experience, it was very nice. In Brazil, we have this, we miss this space to talk with each other, like in a calm way. You can talk about outside of the politically correct for sure, because sometimes with conservatives, when they go to the media, especially for the mainstream media, you know how the behavior that they have with us. So we are the Nazis, the fascists, the homophobic, the xenophobic, and so many other E's that we start to do memes, because you can't debate with people like that. You can't say, no, I'm not a racist, no, I'm not a fascist. Of course you are not. And they don't even know what does it means. So what do? We do memes, and then they lost their credibilities. So nowadays, even people like me, that's not that smart, we have Twitter accounts with millions of followers, and even people that is outside of the politics, like normal people from the society, they have more followers than the mainstream media press. And it shows a lot about the moment of Brazil. We are in a moment that we are really changing the key. We are really getting outside of the socialism system. We have, in the first time of our history, a liberal minister, no, liberal here is another meaning, sorry. Pro-market minister of economy, which means that less intervention. We want a smaller state. So it's basically what Ronald Reagan was telling us since the 70s. Thanks God, like 40 years later, but now Brazil is in the right way. And I expect to see all of you in the CPAC Brazil again, because we are going to do another one this year, and you'll be even more excited than I promise you.
Elias.
Yeah, CPAC Brazil was really great. last year. One of the great things that we learned, and I think was one of the great things that we did, was to focus on our activists, because they have done a lot of things for us as a conservative movement, and especially for this new government, this new president is in Brazil. And for sure, this year that we are expecting to celebrate this past year in our conservative country. And now we saw a lot of good energy in CPAC Brazil, and I think if I can tell you something is to focus on our activists, because they need to be more close to us, because without this, the society, without their people that is always fighting battles for us on social media, for example, we can lose the battle, the war. We need to focus on them, because in our CPAC Brazil we saw it like Dan just said, a lot of good people and young people cheering and screaming good things for about Brazil, about this new moment. It was really exciting. I think we can do even better now, and of course, like my boss said, everybody is invited to see this energy, to see this conservative movement growing in our country. Really, it was really great. And I'm gonna say like just the brilliant guy said, thank you ACU for all the support. Really, you guys was amazing. All the support, all the attention with the staff. Really, Match Lab was great as well. So we just want to thank you guys and see you there.
Are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah.
So Carrie is living in Germany, and I do know that when we talked maybe a year ago, you had well, you also had a vision for young people. So Carrie, what is your question?
Carol? Yeah, thank you. I'm Kerry Wrightington. I'm the chairman of the Republican Overseas in Germany, born American from California, lived in Germany 33 years. My questions to you guys are, how did you keep the right-wing groups, because sometimes in Germany we call ourselves conservatives, you get the really right wing trying to get involved. So right now as the Republican Party in Germany, we don't even, how do you keep that away? And were you guys all profitable your first CPAC?
Maybe before anybody attempts to answer that, this is a critical question. Here at CPAC in America, we say that anybody can buy a ticket to come. But in the last 2 years, we've had to change that, because we have what in our country we call sometimes white nationalists or neo-Nazis. There's a term called alt-right. These people are not acceptable. And so when we do CPACs overseas, we want to make sure that our partners have alignment on this. That there are different kinds of conservatives. We understand that. There are going to be people who are more traditional, people who are maybe what Andrew Cooper would describe as classical liberal. We can work with the traditionalists in Korea, and we can work with the classical liberals in Australia. We're very comfortable with all of these. The Hungarians are traditional, but what's not acceptable are people who base their views on hate, on race, on exclusion. Maintaining a country's culture and tradition, that's a good thing. Hate and exclusion is unacceptable. So the question is, how do you keep our version of white nationalists, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, how do you keep them away?
Because in Germany, if you say you're a conservative, it's a nasty word. It's a nasty word. It's really a nasty word. So how do you keep, you know?
Okay, I might start with that. I mean, it's a big concern, and Dan was very clear from the outset. what his view on the alt-right, for want of a better term, is, and I was pleased to hear that. Australia's like most countries. We have some very fervent anti-immigration / anti-Muslim groups that are very aggressive in their rhetoric, and we have some, some white nationalists, borderline kind of Nazi types. Thankfully, our concerns at this inaugural conference were more keeping the left-wing Antifa protesters out of the conference with all this extra security we had to put on. But it's occupying my mind. What do we do? And we have one particular party in Australia that does tap into that quite successfully, and it's sort of like a 7% of the national vote kind of party, so not insignificant. And they have some federal senators, and but they're not the right fit. Now they bought tickets and they attended, and we did give one of their senators 10 minutes speaking time, but I have concerns. I have concerns about those. But one thing is also, we're promoting a forum it's a talk fest where different ideas need to be thrashed out, different ideas need to be discussed. So I think it's a tricky one, because one way we can handle these things is if there's someone with an uncomfortable topic that is popular, perhaps we put them into a debate situation and shine the sunlight on the argument. Because that to me, if we believe in free speech, that is really the forum, the method that we can address these ideas that may not be fitting with true conservatism. But it's an issue. It's an issue, Dan, and I'm not entirely certain how to deal with it just yet.
First of all, if you are doing the right thing, if you are telling the truth, that's it. Do this. Doesn't matter what they say. In Brazil, we had a military regime from 1964 until 1985. And then after that, it was almost the same. If you say in Brazil during the end of the 80s that, oh, I'm a right wing, it was like, are you crazy? Shut up. Don't tell it. Please, please, please. I think probably maybe it's the same way that you feel it there in Germany. And as they can't debate with you, they try to label you with these kind of things, Nazi. So ask them to sit down next to you and start a debate, like a normal debate where both sides speaks. They don't have arguments when they start to talk about it, and especially if the mainstream media is not going to show it on internet. Internet, like you have to see how crazy the leftists are to control the internet. But they can't say control. They say we want to, democratize internet. All these soft and good words for their plans. In the beginning, it's very hard. I can tell you because this is pretty much the story of my father. In the beginning, when he was talking that, I'm against, for example, conservative actions you say here, for the black people or to the Indians, a space in the university, is that right? Affirmative action, sorry, I misunderstood. Affirmative action. They said, you're racist. Then what they made a set, our former president, Dilma Rousseff, from the Labour's Party, she made a set of books and movies showing men kissing men, women kissing women, to show in the schools for children of 5 years old. And then guess what? Jair Bolsonaro said, this is wrong, I'm against that. I don't want this in the schools. And the mainstream media and his opposite politics from the opposition started to say, you are homophobic, you're homophobic. And in the end of the day, people was like, no, but I do agree with this conservative guy. He's pretty much crazy, but I agree with him. So after 6 years, he got president because soon or later people get full of that. And so my advice, if I can give you an advice, is if this is right, do that and show internet how the hypocrisy that they are. I think people, even when don't tell, they know what is going on.
Yeah, if I can add something, I think this is also we did something like that. When you start to move open to register, you can ask for all the people that will register to put all the social media they have in the registration. Because when you do that, our team can look it up and see what they're saying, the Twitter, what they're saying, in the Instagram. It's a way. It's a way to search if they are this kind of people that you say or not. We did that. Of course, a lot of people that are against us, they didn't do that. But it's a good way to highlight these people. So if they didn't put their social media there, it's we need to put our eyes on this person. Okay, it's just a way. Of course, this can be much better.
On the CPAC credential, we have our pictures, and so people have to provide their pictures. We do look quickly to see if we can find, some of these bad people, and we find some, and we just say, sorry, you can't come. In Japan, obviously, Japan is not a Caucasian country. Do you have another version of like the white nationalist that you have to be careful with?
日本でも確かに保守主義とか掲げる団体がいっぱいあって、それぞれにとっての保守主義っていうのが定義が全部バラバラなんですね。
Yes, in Japan there are a lot of organizations and groups. They say that we are conservative, and the definition are very different. They're very diverse.
だからある程度の公約数でそこを上手に束ねていかないと CPAC なんかも成功しないわけです。
So unless we try to put them all together by organized by some majority of the group, CPAC never be successful.
なので私が考えたのはその軸となるポリシーをまずしっかりと定めること、そしてそこに賛同する人たちが集まってもらって CPAC を開催するということでそのバラバラ感を防ぐというやり方を取りました。
So try to avoid the scattered groups and by doing them by themselves. I try to put the core policy at the center, and people who agree with those policies, they gather together. So based on that, we try to organize a successful CPAC.
その軸となるポリシーを決めるにあたってやはり大事であったのがこの JCPAC の起こり自体がこの日米同盟の強化とそしてやっぱり ACU と連携した上での JCU でありましたのでアメリカと日本それぞれの共通のコンサバティズムの価値観でいけるものをいくつか柱に決めてそれで JCPAC の骨格を作ったわけです。
So when we decided which policies would be the core, so the US-Japan alliance are very important. So and ACU and JCU are co-partnering for this and co-hosting. So we try to choose the core policies who are among the shared values and shared concerns between US and Japan.
それは例えば自由主義リバティですね。自由主義であり、そして愛国心であり、そして自己責任セルフレスポンシビリティですね。自己責任であり、そして繁栄主義。この4つが軸になると私は考えました。
So I thought 4 pillars here: liberty, patriotism, self-responsibility, and prosperity. Those are the 4 pillars.
これを軸にやりましたので、いわゆるそこに入らない右翼の人たちとか人種差別主義者はおのずと弾かれていくことになったわけです。
So we made it very clear on these 4 policies of pillars. So those people like a far rightist or the racist, so they cannot be affiliated with us. So naturally they go away.
だから1回目、2回目、3回目 JCPAC を開いていく中でもよく発言する登壇者の発言に注意してこの人の発言は非常に人種差別主義だなと思ったらその方は二度と翌年以降の CPAC にはもう呼ばないという主義を貫いております。
So we had 3 CPACs, but we listened very carefully of the remarks by the speakers on the stage. And if we found that some remarks of the speakers had some racist ideology or some ideas, we never invite those speakers from the next time.
こういうやり方で注意をしております。
So those are the ways that we are careful and avoiding those situations.
Thank you. Patrick, Andrew, Korea. I'm not aware of any concerns like this in Korea, but I could be ignorant.
So thank God we don't have that kind of issues at this moment, but we have a lot more different and various issues that we are faced with. So I think the bottom line is that I don't think we should have impossible objective or goal. Because if you have a goal like, I am going to turn everyone in my nation conservative, you'll be disappointed and you'll be mad at yourself. So I think having a practical objective is very important. And how would you purify a jar of polluted water? There could be different ways of doing it. You could divide waters down to molecular level and things like that. But what we've decided to do is keep adding pure water into that jar, on and on and on and on. And one day, it will be filled with maybe not 100%, but 95%, 99% of clean water. So please be consistent and persistent. If you do what you do on a daily basis through all kinds of available platforms, but if you are consistent and persistent, the people with right mind will see that you are doing the right thing. People will definitely see it. Of course, we may not be able to turn everyone into conservative, but some of the people with a great heart will see that this is the right way. So please be consistent and persistent.
Dan, if I could just add two short comments to that. One is that at the practical level, we employed a recruiting company who were going to look after all of our registrations, and we supplied them with a very, very mild test to see if they were genuine conservatives in the sense that we believe they should be. I wouldn't say that's a caustic test, but we did apply that level of filtering. And the second point is that we did identify one or two renegades in the place and kind of ran them out of town. And that happened, and you can always do that.
Very good. And Andrew, we're running out of time today.
Yeah, I just might add one thing, and picking up on Eduardo's point, there are white nationalists, and we know who they are. But to the left, we're all white nationalists, right? We're all racist. Dan and Matt got called some terrible names by the left-wing press. We had Raheem Kassam, I think he's speaking here this year, is he? Again, and Nigel Farage came down from Britain. And Raheem Kassam, who's an ex-lapsed Muslim, was called an anti-Muslim ideologue. Or we had an American senator in Australia lecturing Raheem Kassam about his thoughts on being Muslim. It's crazy, right? So you've got to be aware that the left think we're all mad. They think they were calling it a hate fest, not a talk fest, a hate fest. We had former Prime Minister Tony Abbott speak. We had senators and members of parliament, but it was a hate fest by hateful people, us, conservatives. We've got to be aware of that too.
Yeah, I hear two common themes. We do have to be careful with some, but not be afraid to stand for what's right. So the purpose of this was to give all of you an opportunity to hear some of what has happened. It's not to answer all the questions. Obviously, it would take a whole week of programming to do that. But to give an idea of what it's like, to give some hope, to draw some questions. Maybe this is going to be harder than you realize. But I want to thank all of you for joining this panel. It's been very valuable for me to hear, and it's wonderful working with all of you. It really is. Thank you so much. As our panelists exit the stage, I want to introduce Robert, who we're now going to get granular. We've been talking about big themes. You feel free to introduce him. Robert is a professional conference and event planner. I wanted him, and again, he could speak for a week about how to organize a large conference, but it's going to be about 10 minutes to give a taste of what it's like to work with a professional. We hire a professional who has an entire team when we do our own CPAC. We don't do this on our own. I would recommend you do not attempt to try to organize a large conference on your own. If you've organized conferences of 200 people before, and you try to jump to 1,000 people or more, it's a different beast. So Robert, and then followed by Robert, we'll have Peter Breen, who I can't tell you how valuable Peter is, but I'll introduce him a little later. Robert.
Hi everybody, my name's Robert. I'm from Australia, and I had the pleasure of working with Andrew in working with his team, and my team came together to organise the CPAC, or the logistics of CPAC. But I am all ready to give you my background. I'm actually trained in music. I'm a musical director. I conduct operas. I have a master's in conducting from Indiana University here. And I went on and joined Entrepreneurs Organisation 20 years ago, and had the pleasure of attending free enterprise and small business conferences around the world. So I became a big champion of small business, becoming business, and what I call responsible capitalism. Anyone familiar with the writings of Charles Handy? Okay, so that's and I wanted to start with a great little quote. One of my great inspirations is Winston Churchill. And he has a wonderful quote, and you can almost apply this to the socialism theme, and it says, this is Winston Churchill, there are two places where socialism will work. In heaven, where it is not needed, and in hell, where they already have it. So with that in mind, what I've learned in event production, and my company has produced events for up to 15,000 people around the world, is you're essentially in show business with logistics. Whenever you gather people in a room and want to tell them a story and take them on an advantage, on a journey, the rules of the theatre apply. Once you define how many people are coming, and sometimes you don't know, is the stage high enough? Are the lights bright enough? Can everyone see the stage clearly? Once you get over a certain amount of people, you're going to start needing screens and cameras, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is appeal to the 5 senses of the human being. We all communicate through our senses: what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we taste. So as a good event communicator and as a producer of music and concerts and shows, I want my audience to be totally consumed and communicated with. So a good logistics team will take care of human needs. Is the catering organised? Is the accommodation appropriate? Are the speakers communicated with clearly? We have a registration system where we can print name tags and all that sort of stuff. That comes with logistics. But I'd be more than happy to, in the 10 minutes I have, just to give you an overview, is that I'm extremely optimistic about the global interest in conservatism. With what happened with the election of Boris Johnson is unprecedented in the rise of conservative values and the desire to be around like-minded people. This is an international movement. I'm excited, and I'm hoping that we can all work together to spread this message through effective communication and delivering a great show for our people who want to be part of this movement. So thank you. Question, Dan, or does anyone? Is Dan with us? Well, he was. Sorry, you want to? Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Clark? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Is Peter Green in here?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Green is going to talk about hotel negotiations.
Yes. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Peter Green, and I'm with Conference Direct. We've partnered with the American Conservative Union now this is our 7th year. And we work with this facility, the Gaylord, and we work with other hotel facilities all over the world. But Conference Direct is a global provider of meeting outsource solutions. So ACU, when we first started working with them 7 years ago, things were a little bit out of whack in regards to specifically the hotel contract that they had signed and what was actualizing here at the facility. And our company specializes in this type of thing, and that's what I wanted to really granularly talk to you all about when you're looking at holding a CPAC or a large event at your home countries or specific venues. Because it's very, very important that you all understand when you're first formulating this and you approach a facility or you approach a hotel company or you approach a place that can hold these venues to have your acts together. And when I say have your acts together, they're going to want to look at it purely from the business standpoint first and less about the content and what is actually going to be taking place. What they're concerned about is what is the revenue that you are potentially going to be bringing to the facility or the venue, how many people are you looking to accommodate, and have you done this before? If it's a first time, that sends up a big red flag, and if it's a first time event that you're organizing, they want to have some kind of backing, the same as if you went to a financial institution and wanted to borrow money, they want collateral. So you have never done a CPAC before, and that's where you come back and say, we have partners in America with ACU, or we have other countries that have done this, and we are prepared to come to the table with X amount of bona fide credentialed revenue in order to book your facility. And that's great. Then the hotel, the facility, the venue is going to want to talk to you. And what's important is that you also say, do you have flexibility with the dates or the pattern of the week or how many days you're planning to hold, whether it's a one-day, an afternoon, or a two-day event. What's particularly important when you bring everybody together too is how is it going to be perceived by whoever your audience is that you're trying to accommodate. And by that I mean when you bring them all in. Is the facility and are you yourselves ready? Is the signage proper? My colleague said all the theatrics. It's very, very important that you create a professional atmosphere when you pull everyone together. And I can tell you it's our biggest struggle here with CPAC is getting that ballroom early enough so we can get that staging, production, and all of the media set up before we have our first speaker on the stage. And we're struggling with that all the time. We contract that years in advance, and the earliest the facility gives us that ballroom is traditionally on a Wednesday afternoon. And our first keynote is tomorrow. So how do we set up that whole ballroom in such a short time? Well, it's crews, it's throwing a lot of people at it, and making sure we're ready. If we can get it earlier, we do, but it's all based on how the facility manages the business. And ACU's here for a finite period of days, and we take a finite number of guest rooms, we book a finite amount of food and beverage revenue, we take so much meeting space, and it unfortunately doesn't fill the entire facility. So they have the rest of the guest rooms, the rest of the facility that they need to accommodate. So I bring this back around to you when you're planning. When you're planning, how many people do you want to accommodate? How much food and beverage are you willing to commit to the facility? And if you don't want to commit food and beverage, what's your top dollar that you're willing to at least put toward rental of the facility? And then when you contract, if you've not done a facility or a hotel or a conference contract, it is so important that you partner or you somehow facilitate someone who has, whether it's an attorney or a facility, to keep you out of legal issues and to make sure that you know exactly what you're signing up for and you don't get into trouble. And those are the key elements that allow that. The other thing I wanted to talk to is when you're trying to find the right venue in your home places. There are a lot of places that you can look to in order to identify facilities that are going to best accommodate what you're trying to accomplish. And your number one place should be your local Convention and Visitors Bureau, your local tourism board, or your local meeting and convention chamber of commerce, even if you have it in your countries, because they're the ones that can gear you or guide you and help you facilitate at least identification of those facilities that can hold the event. And then, of course, IACC is the International Association of Conference Centers. They have a website, you can find them also easily on the web to identify facilities. Google in your city, with Googling even events, if you want to hold 500-700 people. And lastly, your as I said, visitors commission. So I just wanted to touch on those things, and particularly that you pay attention to what you're looking to accomplish and be prepared when you're first approaching the facility or the venue.
Don't walk away. You heard from Robert and Peter. Let me stress, if you are not working with somebody like Robert or with somebody like Peter, you're losing. I've got a cousin who is a professional gambler. He makes lots of money in Las Vegas. And these professional gamblers, when they sit down at a table, they know who the person is who's not the professional, and they know that they're going to take all of his money. If you sit down to try to negotiate a hotel contract, you've already lost. Guaranteed. Do not try to negotiate a hotel contract on your own. You have to find somebody like Peter. When I first took this job just over 6 years ago, I was not involved in professional conference planning. My staff that I inherited was telling me about this Peter guy, and I was trying to make sense of it. What do you mean he helps book rooms, but people book their... And I asked Peter to come in, and I was so confused, and I was asking question after question after question. And Peter had to talk to me like I was a third grader. And eventually I got it, but I didn't appreciate it for another maybe 12 months. I understood it, and I understood he was valuable, but it wasn't until 12 months later that I truly appreciated it. I just can't stress enough. Do not try to book a venue, whether it's a hotel or some big conference venue. Do not do that on your own. You have to find a professional like Peter. If you don't know how to find somebody like Peter in your own country, maybe Peter can help you find something like that. Similarly, a professional conference planner. If you're trying to do it on your own, you are going to make so many mistakes. I really encourage you. And if you don't know how to find somebody like that, you can ask Robert. We have our own professionals. Carrie, you do this too in Germany. Reach out and talk to people. You've got time to do this well. Any questions for the person who probably saved us from no, I shouldn't say probably. You did save us from bankruptcy 7 or 8 years ago. Thank you. Okay, well, speaking of money, Ryan, we work with a group called Targeted Victory that helps us with social media, both promoting the event and also helping to raise funds for our own organization. And I thought it'd be good to have somebody from Targeted Victory, Ryan, explain what it is you do and the kinds of things you can do for groups like ours.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. As Dan said, my name is Ryan Mearstein. I'm with Targeted Victory. Targeted Victory is a digital marketing firm here in the DC area out of Arlington, Virginia. And we work with conservative campaigns, causes, committees all over the country, helping them raise money online, promote their candidates and causes, pretty much anything. So that goes from creative to working with the social platforms, email, text messaging, and then all of the kind of paid media that comes behind that. This is something that, if someone wanted to really sit down and talk about what a promotional plan looks like around an event like this, we could talk for hours about it. And I'm happy to connect with any of you afterwards and have a much more in-depth conversation about your plans. I just wanted to touch on 3 different things today. And those 3 things are attention, location, and iteration. And the first, and I think is probably the most important with attention, and we all need to realize that we are living in a world where attention is completely broken. We, as average humans, we're watching 5.3 hours of video a day across screens. We're receiving over 120 emails. We're sending over 100 text messages. We are all over the place, and technology has made it so much easier for us to communicate with each other, and has made it so much harder as marketers to talk to the individuals that we want to talk to about what is important to us. And so what does that mean for us? And I think the first thing that means is that we have to be fighting for attention every day. And we need to realize that that fight is not against the left. You are competing against other conservative organizations that want these conservatives' time. And so your content has to be better than those other conservative organizations, because we're not going to create new attention for these users. We actually have to get them to shift from other content that they are consuming to the content that we are producing. Two, it means that we have to have resources to put behind this content. If we think these tech platforms are biased against conservatives, wait till you see how biased they are against people that don't spend money on their platforms. They will not help you at all. There's an old movie line, if you build it, they will come. I promise you, if that is your mantra for your digital plan, your program will fail. You have to put money behind these things. We have to take the content to the users, and we have to have an always above, in all of the above strategies. So we have to be willing to do email, we have to be willing to do SMS, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp. Wherever these people are spending time, we have to be building content for those platforms. And then the last thing, what we talk about as an agency is we're not creating eye-catching content, we're creating thumb-stopping content. So we need that person as they're scrolling through their feed to stop for that second and take in what it is that we're trying to say. And we need to be very clear in what we're trying to say. If we are trying to get people to attend an event, in our content we need to say, sign up for the event here. We need to be very specific in our ask. We only have seconds with these people, and we need to ensure that we are using every single second effectively. Second thing I want to talk about is location. We do a ton of event turnout for much smaller events than Cpac, and without fail, what we always find is that proximity to the event is still the #1 indicator of attending an event. All of you obviously proved that wrong from where you have traveled from to be here today. But what I see that as, that means that the media plan that you're running, the turnout plan that you're running in the city where the event is located looks different than the plan that you're running as you get further and further away from the event. You can have much looser targeting the closer to the event that you are. And in fact, by having looser targeting closer to the event, you may bring new people into the fold that otherwise wouldn't have been there. But as you get further away, you need to tighten up that targeting and ensure that you are talking to those top conservatives that will make the investment to travel to an event like this. And then the last thing is iteration. And in the digital space, content is king, but content can also crush your organization. And unfortunately, you just need massive amounts of it to be effective on these platforms. But you don't have to overthink these things. We say digital content has very short shelf lives, but that doesn't mean that you can't do little things to make those shelf lives a little longer. So you have templated creative announcing your event, announcing speakers, etc. As you see less and less engagement along that on the way, change the colors, change the pictures, change the words, do different things, try everything. And then just use the free platforms that are available to you to learn what is effective and what isn't effective, and drive what is effective into the ground until it is no longer effective. So if something is working, drive it into the ground. When it's no longer working, make a slight change, try something new. So attention, location, iteration are the three things that I wanted to concentrate on today. Happy to take any questions. Michi.
Yeah. I'm from Japan. You're talking is very interesting. And I have a question. How do you think about the differences between the platform of SNS? For example, if we have advertisement on Facebook and Instagram, it should be different because the market is different. But still now we are struggling to find which one is how should we do the kind of advertisement or PR on each platform. So how do you think about the differences between those platforms? How do you approach them?
So we talk about things being platform native and just ensuring, and we have teams that say like, all right, this is going to Instagram, it will look like this. This is going to Facebook, it will look like this. And we build those processes out so that this isn't television where it's one size fits all. This isn't direct mail where it's one size fits all. We literally need to create 7 different versions of the same message, some maybe being a nice, very pretty picture that's going to go on Facebook or Instagram, all the way down to something that's only 160 characters that's going to go through an SMS. But, that is building those internal muscle memory that says, when it's Facebook, these are our specs. When it's Instagram, these are our specs. When it's text, this is. And I personally think you have to be willing to try them all.
I will say that ACU, for a number of years, tried to do social media to promote our events on our own, and then we would try to take pieces that that a vendor could help us, and we finally realized we really need a group like Targeted Victory to really do that for us. Targeted Victory has a very large staff, very professional. It's more economical for us, and it's going to be more effective when we coordinate with a professional organization like Targeted Victory. That we just are not going to be able to know and learn everything they already know. Yes.
Hi, I'm Mate from Croatia, and we run one conservative think tank there. I'm interested in an example. How big does the conference need to be to maybe have a organization separate like yours to pay? Is it 500 people maybe, or till now we organized it by ourselves. So now we want to go a step further. So how does it go to cover all the costs?
Do you have any thoughts on how? Or any of the event planners have thoughts on how big it gets before?
I was going to wait to have Anna join us up here until you excuse me. Anna, maybe you could join, because Anna Carbonell is a professional in many different ways, but she's going to be helping us with the old-fashioned way in America of how do you build a crowd. In America, there's a fascination with technology and digital, but you've got to put in this, what we call sweat equity. You've got to still do things the old-fashioned way, maybe the way you're doing now. So then how do you, if you're building coalitions, how do you start to sprinkle in the digital? Anna, maybe you want to take the first stab at this. On May 1st, we will be in Miami, Florida, holding what we are calling CPAC Exile, which will focus on people who have been exiled or have had to flee their countries, whether it's Venezuela or North Korea and other places. Anna, maybe how do you transition from building crowds the old-fashioned way and moving to incorporate digital technologies?
Thank you, Dan. I think one of the most important things to keep in mind in terms of crowd building is that it's an all of the above approach. There's no one secret formula in terms of the crowd that you want to obtain. But rather, what's critical is that your mindset be that it's almost like a mindset of a campaign. It's a discipline that you have to establish what your goal is going to be, and then being able to determine within that goal what's going to be inventory of the coalitions that you're going to build out. For example, if you deal with chambers of commerce that was mentioned before, well, what are the chambers of commerce that are inclined to work with you, and how would they be willing to promote your event within their regular gatherings or meetings? What are the other organizations? Are there business associations that are willing to offer you a venue? Have you taken stock of who are some of the surrogates that you'd be able to take before these organizations and have them speak on behalf to recruit participants? So what I would say is that probably the larger mindset approach is that you have to take it as a campaign mindset. That would be number one. Number two, you have to take inventory, realistic inventory of who are the organizations that you count with that are part of your inner group, and what are they able to facilitate for you? Are they willing to facilitate you speaking time to talk at their monthly breakfast or their monthly gathering? Thirdly, what are your media partners, right? Which is obviously a big challenge for all of us in the conservative movement. Are there earned media opportunities that don't cost you money but give you the opportunity to go on a regular basis in order to get folks to hear about what you're doing and what the conference is about? And do you have surrogates that allow you to do that as well? So I would say that on the economic side of it, where there's not a paid component, it's all of those approaches. It's one, your coalition development. Second, your earned media, and thirdly, your community stakeholders. Those are folks that are going to be serving as surrogates of influencers that you're going to be identifying and taking inventory of and plugging them in where they're necessary, whether it's through an earned media component, whether it's on a digital effort. But at the end of the day, the most important thing that I think is critical in terms of the mechanics of crowd building is give yourself the time that's necessary from when you decide to hold the event to when it's actually going to take place, so that you're able to execute all these disciplines in a way that's effective, and give yourself also the flexibility, because as Ryan mentioned, if you see that, for example, a targeted Facebook campaign to business owners is not working, then you need to be able to shift that to another dynamic that might involve mail, or might involve text messaging. So what I would say is that with crowd building, it's an all of the above approach, but you have to give yourself the lead time necessary to determine what's going to work best, what's going to be the best tool in your box to be able to execute. And obviously you will learn with time, because each community is different. For example, in South Florida, we have the dynamic of folks from various countries that have fled communism, right? So there's differences within their countries of origin, but there's a common bond in that they all fled communism. So therefore, you can go and talk to them about the importance of engaging in a cause like this, because there is an affinity even though they're different in nationality. So be willing to think outside the box when it comes to that, because there might be individuals or groups that you might not be thinking about that would be natural allies in this type of effort.
Can I ask a question?
And let me ask a question, then Michi, you ask your question and then answer both. How do you combine digital with crowd building traditional? What is that? How do you do that? How do you cross-pollinate?
Well, I'll start. I know that, for example, in what we do is the most important thing is to establish a budget of, the budget's going to basically dictate how much you're going to pursue in terms of an earned media free component, and how much is going to be within a paid component of digital. So one is establish a budget, and obviously making sure that within that budget it's geared towards crowd building message. Obviously count back from the time that your budget allows, so that you don't run out of what's needed in the budget a week before your campaign. So that's very critical in terms of the discipline of organization of your spending digital dollars. And then the other factor is to understand how folks communicate that information, whether it's through a Facebook platform or whether it's through an Instagram platform, and making sure that you accommodate your approach in a way that reflects the feedback that you're receiving. If you're receiving greater feedback on Facebook than you are on Instagram, and you have limited resources, well then put your resources where they're going to be most effective for the audience that you're trying to build. The same holds true, for example, in how to combine what Dan was mentioning into how to combine it. If you have one of your surrogates speaking at an event to promote your conference, well, that's something that you're able to incorporate within your digital campaign. In other words, it has to be a continuous discipline of communication where you're building up momentum towards that event, and it's having the dual purpose of, one, keeping folks engaged, so you hopefully didn't capture them with that one initial post, but you maybe capture them with that third or that fourth post. And that discipline is critical. So what I would say is take inventory of who your partners are in that effort, establish a budget that is serious, and make sure that that budget takes into account the time that is necessary to build that digital campaign.
Yeah, I would just, second that digital that is not complementing everything else is eventually going to cap out. It will only be so effective. So if you are running a good earned media program and you have a surrogate that's going to be doing some type of local news hit or some type of conservative news hit in a specific market, then you should be moving some of your paid digital around the event into that market at the exact same time. Because, I talked about that attention, the people will connect those dots, like, oh, I saw that on TV, oh, now I'm seeing it in my inbox, or I'm seeing it in my Facebook feed. So making sure that those two teams are seamless and the digital team understands where those efforts are occurring so that they can kind of be the infantry behind and help buoy that message.
The one thing also I would add is, kind of run through, are you hitting all the various touch points? Meaning, have you engaged them via text? Have you engaged them through the various platforms? Have you engaged through earned media? Have you engaged through coalitions of various groups?
What's earned media?
Yeah, so basically earned media is any media that you don't have to pay for. Any media that you're able to obtain access to in the form of an interview, in the form of an opinion piece. So if you write an opinion piece about your event as to what you all believe in, or you get a surrogate or a community stakeholder that's known in your community that echoes your views, and that gets published in a newspaper, well, you can then turn around and use that as a vehicle to promote your event digitally. If one of your surrogates does a hit on the local news and there's a great sound bite, you can turn that around into a digital ad and also use it to promote your event. If you speak at an event that gets press coverage, take that and use it within your digital campaign. But in order for all of that to work, is you need the time to be able to, so that's why I started off by saying you have to view the crowd building, dynamic, coalition building, digital, all of the above approach, almost like a campaign. And the goal of your campaign, the success of your campaign, is how many bodies you bring to the event. And so therefore that type of mental organization, discipline, will be key in terms of the success.
Oh, BT, yeah.
Yes, I want to ask you a question to Anna. And do you think we should accept interview requests from the liberal opposite media or not? But sometimes we get such kind of requests from the opposite media, but we are in two minds whether accept it or not. So
That's an excellent question. This is one of those questions that probably requires...
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. The question was that should you accept media interviews from a liberal press entity when it comes to promoting these types of events? And it's an excellent question because it comes down to your discernment. You understand best your community and the interest in your community. And I'll tell you from my experience in my community, there are left-leaning journalists who are fair and will provide you an opportunity to share that information without editorializing, right? But there are other left-leaning journalists who will use that opportunity to discredit your effort and try to manipulate it. And so that's where you need to be able to discern. My rule of thumb is that if it's being used as a manipulation to advance the left agenda, then you basically discard it and not. But if it's a serious journalist who, yes, could have left tendencies, but has a reputation of being someone that is fair and providing both sides, then I would take advantage of it that way.
Okay. Andrew, we have last question.
Yeah. So, I've spoken to a lot of digital companies, and they say, "What's your budget? We're going to spend all this money, and these are all the things we've got to do, and do this, do that, and put these resources in." All I care about is selling tickets, right? So, are you, Ryan, or are there digital firms out there that will say, I can afford to spend, let's say, for argument's sake, $50 per ticket on digital media. Are there firms out there that will say, you know what, we'll sell those tickets for $50 a pop, and that's all you pay us?
We're getting close to that place. I think we have a few firms that are getting close. We're not quite there yet, but I do think that if you're working with a firm that is not laying out a legit performance marketing plan that shows what things will cost, what cash flow will be month over month, then you shouldn't be working with that firm. But I do think like true performance-based marketing for ticketing, low-dollar fundraising, like yeah, it's coming to that space very quickly.
I'll just add that in the U.S., there are lots and lots of firms, lots and lots of people who will gladly take your money, promising the stars and the moon, the sky, and everything. There are few that deliver. We are using Targeted Victory because we think it's they're a firm with integrity and success. And they know a whole lot more than we do. So we're comfortable working with Targeted Victory, but you need to be choosy. You need to see performance. Thank you so much. These are two real professionals. These are two of the best people in the business. Really appreciate you guys helping us.
Thank you.
Chris, so one thing Anna said is set your budget, right? And then the budget will drive how much you spend on crowd building and social media. But how do you raise the money so that you can have a budget to spend the money? And so Chris is going to, of course, there are lots of different ways to raise money to pay for these things. And all the best intentions of the world are useless if you can't pay for the salaries and the expenses that come along with it. Chris, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the ways to raise money to put on a conference?
Thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Price. I'm with a company called Trade Show Logic. Let me give you the 30 seconds on that. We are a strategic event management company hired by Cpac, and I think when you see the show floor, you're going to see a pretty substantial change over some past years. One of the things that we excel at are building revenue for conferences and trade shows. And so I just want to share a couple, let's call them best practices, trending areas and ideas on how to generate money and what we're seeing out there amongst about 40 shows that we're doing on a regular basis. So as we all know, there were those days when we used to have sponsors who'd spend huge dollars for that banner that sat up top of the roof or near the ceiling, and those things just aren't as popular anymore. Sure, branding is important, but we're seeing some other things that are happening out there. Whenever we go to somebody who is an exhibitor or a sponsor, what they're looking for are typically one of four things. They're looking for either company branding, they're looking to feature some thought leadership that is special to their company, they're looking for new product promotion, and they're also looking for lead generation. So literally, those are the four things in just about every show that we've done, especially over the past few years, that when we make that connection with those, call them wallets, Dan, that what's happening is people are taking attention. So let me just kind of share a couple ideas out there of some things that are really trending. One of the words sponsorships, although we use it a lot, seems to be a little bit esoteric and seems to be replaced more with, just like we talked about a few minutes ago, marketing. What's happening is the folks who are spending those dollars, whether it be on exhibit space or a sponsorship or a presentation, they're looking for metrics. They're looking for reasons when after they spend it, whether it be your marketing person or the CFO, they're looking for some kind of feedback. Was it worth the money that I spent? So, for example, although we work very closely with CPAC, we also work on Connex Con A, which is the largest trade show in the United States, 2.6 million square feet. It's all scalable. It's very, very similar, folks, quite frankly, is these folks are looking for one of those four things to happen. And when they do, they want to look for a metric. From that lead generation, how many of those are quality leads, how many are going to buy, how many kind of go into the hopper. On the thought leadership, it's become a very, very popular thing. People are saying to us, our company knows a lot about things that other people don't know. We share that, and it's kind of like we all talk about the earned advertising or the earned media. All of a sudden, they take what's valuable from what they've learned, glean it with the organization, and it's not your typical ad. It's very, very different. So here's one of the things I recommend in terms of generating money, and I just want to use one kind of classic example. We had an association, so it's slightly different than this, who literally a couple years ago had some attrition in their sponsorships, and they settled in about $400,000. And literally, and I'm going to give you the kind of secrets to what they did, is within 2 years we're at $1.2 million in sponsorships and marketing. And what we've done is this. We have gone out and we've actually done something that a lot of people don't do. We've asked these companies, what are their goals? What are their objectives? Who do they want to meet? Geographically, what's important to them? What does success look like to them? All those things are really important. Now, I will tell you that there's plenty of people out there who say, oh my God, I just don't have time for that. But if you grow from 400,000 to 1.2 million in 2 years, you have time for that, right? Now, Dan, to your point, one of the things that happens is if you don't have time, because there's a zillion things that go on to producing a conference like this, then there's other people, there's companies like ours, there's plenty of companies, you heard some just dynamic people who are just up here who can help you to connect those dots. Literally, oftentimes, because of the experiences that several of us have, we can help you move those things forward, leap the learning curve, show you how to do it, and actually make those things happen. The biggest challenge that we're seeing out there is producers of events are nervous about change. And what they want to do is they want to kind of stick to the tried and true, but if you listen to, we just listened to in our last two speakers, my gosh, all of a sudden there's this blend between traditional media and social media, and retargeting, and all kinds of digital marketing. It's another thing that we pay a lot of attention to is asking people, not just what they're currently doing to grow their company and achieve their objectives, but what is it that you'd really like to do that you're not doing right now? So, for example, those things can triple a budget, which is pretty nice in terms of financing. When you talk about exhibits, one of the things I'd ask you to look at on the CPAC show floor is experiential. You know, we all hear it, there's some of these buzzwords that seem like they're overused, but at the end of the day, what happens is you all know, all of you, as well as all the people that you want to reach out there or spend money with you, don't have a lot of time. So when they have so many options to go to so many different events, it's got to be so worth their time and their money at the same time. So we've got to make sure when we ask the question, what does value look to you at the end of, say, the conference? That's not a bad question to ask, because oftentimes we can build something that maybe we haven't in the past. So I just ask all of you, and Dan, I appreciate you giving us a chance, that what we do is we kind of look at our events and make them more experiential. You've heard of activations. Make people not only come and walk down an aisle or listen to a conference, but think of ways you can get them more involved. So it's not just important for their company, but it's important for their career. We're finding that it's generating lots of new revenue. Dan? Thank you.
While Dave is coming forward, I know we've got friends from overseas who have flown overnight, so this is, you know, I know this is taxing. This will be, we're going to wrap up soon, but while Dave is coming forward, Kim, would you please stand up? Kim in the back, wave, please, Kim. We have friends from Croatia, South Africa, and from every continent on the planet. If you are interested in setting up a private meeting with us to discuss the possibility of holding a CPAC in Guatemala or in Venezuela, not Venezuela, they're not going to take us to Venezuela. But we had a pop-up CPAC in Hong Kong. We snuck into Hong Kong. Andrew and Jay and AC, we snuck into Hong Kong after CPAC Japan and had a pop-up CPAC in Hong Kong. That was fabulous. So maybe we will go to Venezuela. Meet with Kim afterward, and we can schedule time to have a private meeting. But Dave Mohel and the communications director at ACU, a man named Ian Walters, are the godfathers of what we call broadcast growth. We have about 2,000 credentialed media from all over the world who come. And it's this man's brainchild on how to do this. And political organizations in the United States, like the Republican National Committee, they seek Dave's advice. How do we do what you guys do at CPAC? So I just briefly, but Michi asked a question, do you work with liberal media? And Dave can probably answer that since that's pretty much all you ever do. There's a real value in bringing the media to your events. So Dave, I know time is kind of running short here, but would you please explain kind of what you do?
Well, the one thing about working with liberal media is when they do talk to conservatives, that's probably the first time they've had that conversation because they just talk among themselves. So we open the doors and let those liberal media in, let them see what we're saying, let them try to poke holes in the logic, and as long as they are reporting close to the facts, we're going to win. What we do on Broadcast Row is very unique. With the problem with conservatives is most of the people can't take days off from work. We value work. So we try to bring the CPAC experience to as many people as we can. So throughout the conference, if you look outside the ballroom, we have 40 booths set up with media outlets from all over the world that are broadcasting live content from CPAC. That means that their local radio host or their national favorite radio host gets to come on and say, at CPAC today, this is what I heard, this is what I learned. They'll be able to say, I saw an amazing panel, so I invited that person onto my show in the next hour to tell you what they've heard. They're talking to tens of millions of people who can't be here, unfortunately, but are driving to work in the morning, driving home from work in the afternoon. We'll have video cameras for different networks, large new media, whether it's YouTubers and things like that, so we can bring that experience to as many people as possible. And again, the great thing about being conservative is if we present the argument, we're going to win it. So that's what we try to do, is if they can hear, and again, we have National Public Radio in America is the government-run radio program. We have them here broadcasting live tomorrow. They are going to have to put on, our people. They're going to have to say, we heard so-and-so make this argument against socialism, and that's going to be, for the people who listen to NPR on their way to work, the first time they're going to get to hear that argument, and we're going to win those guys over that way. We're going to have thousands of media in the back covering it. Some of them will just try to get that one sound bite, but the rest are going to have hours and hours of great content. Some of them will be streaming it, from gavel to gavel, every speech, every speaker, every panel, that we're going to be able to reach folks who couldn't be here and get the great message out of CPAC. And hopefully, once they see how great of an event it is, maybe the next year they'll come by.
Thank you, David. Any last questions? Andrew? Andrew?
David, I'm negotiating with work at the moment to telecast CPAC Australia. They don't value the content as much as I value it. They want me to pay money. And I'm just wondering if, without revealing the commercials, but I'm just wondering if you took your time back or whatnot. In your experience, is that something that is usual, say here in America? Or,
No, if you have, they'll see the value of it, and if they don't want to, somebody else will. There will be somebody who will come, film it, put it up somewhere, and once they see that, 100,000, 200,000 YouTube hits for a speech, they're going to say, we need to be there to capture that audience. Once they, and again, with most of the media, they're not going to be friendly to a conservative message. There are conservative media that are. So if you make sure that they are there covering it, you'll be able to see that coverage expand, and then they'll have no choice but to cover it.
Can I ask you an economic question? Sorry.
do you charge a fee for the media to come, or do you provide the infrastructure for them and they turn up for free? This is a key thing on cost.
A little bit of both. So there's a bare minimum that they get for free. They're not paying for.
Splits and fees and.
Yeah, they're not paying for access, but if they want anything above access, then whether it's, you know, specialty lines and things like that, they pay the flat fee from the cost. We don't make money off of the media. But any kind of barrier for media coverage is going to be their excuse not to cover it. You don't want them to say, well, we wanted to report on these conservative ideas, or we wanted to discuss it, but we couldn't because X. Or, you know, we wanted to cover this event and say how bad it was so bad they didn't let us in. You know, all that is going to give them more and more excuses to have bad coverage. We make them feel as welcome as possible, you know, almost daring them to find a reason not to cover the actual content.
Just 2 quick points. We do make it easy for the media to be here because, of course, the media is lazy. So we have a filing center, and we make sure that they've got tables, they can type, they can write, they can transmit their stories, you know, via the internet. So we make it easy for them to do their jobs. So that's a good thing. But once you start feeding that viper, the viper will never come back if you don't continue feeding it. So I would be very reluctant to pay a media outlet to cover it. Instead, you show the media outlet that they're the loser for not covering it.
I mean, they pitch themselves as a marketing partner. Lots of advertising, lots of on-screen sort of interviews and those sort of things. But yeah.
Okay, well, for all of you from all over the world, you have met our friends from Australia, and Japan, and Korea, and Brazil. If you have questions for them, feel free to approach them. You've heard from lots of experts on this. Feel free to approach people like Dave. Kim, again, wave. Kim, if you want to set up a meeting to discuss what could be done in the future, don't hesitate to schedule a meeting. And for everybody who spoke, thank you so much. It was important.